with the budget, when people start financially contributing towards something, I believe they get a say in it. Unpopular opinion, I've seen TikToks on how people's opinions shouldn't matter on your big day. I disagree. Hopefully the couple's getting to steer a lot of those decisions, and hopefully those that are contributing are finding joy in giving a gift to someone and letting them really steer it. I think the key is, if you as a couple are accepting financial help for your wedding, you need to know that you're opening the door for sort of a collaborative conversation around it. You need to have all those conversations from the beginning.
Live your life within the moment, and don't go wait until the morning.
Welcome to The Wedding Plan. My name is Tyler Spire, and me and my team produce bespoke events across the globe. This podcast is where I share key advice for planning your own wedding, as well as behind-the-scenes adventures and stories from the events we produce. Hey friends, welcome to The Wedding Plan Season 2, Episode 2, and today we are talking all things wedding budget. So, you're newly engaged, you're starting the wedding planning process, and the very first thing that I like my couples to do is start by discussing the intention of the wedding itself and really coming together as a couple and knowing where your heart is in planning this wedding celebration. And I think that's the first thing you need to do. But the second thing you need to do, and it needs to happen pretty soon after that, is discussing the budget. Now, the first thing I want to say is couples today are seeing all of these images, through social media, on Pinterest, online, wherever you're looking for inspiration. And it's really challenging because there's all of this beauty out there, right? You go on and you look up like wedding flowers, and it's just like so much gorgeous inspiration and amazing things. But the challenge is that there's not a price tag associated with those. So unlike so many other things, like when you go to buy a house, for example, and you go on a site like Redfin, you can go look in the local area and see like what houses on the market cost and get a sense of like, this is what $1 million gets me. This is what $500,000 gets me. This is what $2 million gets me, right? You can kind of like understand what's out there and what it costs. In the wedding world, when you're going to make this large of an investment, at this point in time, there's not like a way to look at all of the wedding images and inspiration and be like, oh, this is $1 million wedding. This is a $2 million wedding. This is a $500,000 wedding. This is a $50,000 wedding, right? Like there's no way to do that. And the other challenge is that, in different markets, those numbers look different, just kind of like the housing market. And there are so many factors that go into like where the budget's going, right? Maybe it's the location, maybe it's the alcohol, maybe it is the decor. And often the decor is what we see that visually triggers kind of, oh, that was expensive. But maybe at least we've had clients that have had budgets that are really high and their decor was very simple, but they were flying in celebrity entertainment, or they were bringing in that amazing chef, or the money was going into other experiential things that didn't necessarily get captured in the photography that is now being seen. So I think that challenge is really huge because couples can't just go online and see what things actually cost. So I want to just kind of have some empathy with y'all as you are kind of starting that search because that doesn't exist. But despite that challenge, it's really important, images aside, to come together as a couple and figure out what you are willing to and able to spend on the big day. So the very first thing you need to ask yourselves is, as a couple, what can we spend and what do we want to spend? I am a firm believer that you should not take out a loan to pay for your wedding. It is not an investment that has financial return, right? It has the memories and it has all the beauty, but the last thing you want to do starting your marriage is saddle yourself with a lot of debt. And I am saying that as a wedding planner that obviously profits off of, clients planning their weddings. And I'm saying this also as a husband, as a dad, as a provider, as someone who is like, look, don't go into debt over your wedding. It's not worth it. So, that being said, as a couple, looking at your own financial resource and saying, what do we want to put towards this is really important. That's step number one. Step number two is talking with your parents or applicable family members on if they are open to and willing to contribute, and if so, what that looks like. Talking to family about money is always a little funky. It always brings up a little bit of discomfort. And so you're not alone if there is that discomfort, but I think it's a conversation worth having. Traditionally, in the United States, the family of the bride would pay for the wedding. So the parents of the bride would pay for the wedding. The parents of the groom would pay for the rehearsal dinner, maybe contribute towards the honeymoon, some other things. The groom would pay for the rings and the difference of the honeymoon or the whole honeymoon. There's kind of all these traditions out there. And then, the couple would kind of maybe supplement with what they want to do. What I will say is in today's more modern day and age, what we're seeing more and more is families splitting the bill for events. In different cultures, there's different expectations on who pays for what. And so especially in America, where we have all these amazing, beautiful cultures and people that have come together to create this one amazing melting pot, right? You have different familial expectations on what will be covered, what will not, things like that. In the work that I do, I would say more often than not, we're seeing a very blended sort of budget situation where, the family of the bride is contributing to like maybe half, the family of the groom is contributing to half, or maybe it's a mix between the couple, the family of the bride, the family of the groom. With divorced parents, there's different dynamics, different households. We've had grandparents contribute. Every wedding's going to look a little different based on you and your family situation. But having that conversation about budget is so important. My other encouragement here is when you're talking about budget, every family's a little different, right? Sometimes you can be like, hey, we're having a wedding. What can you contribute? And that person's like, great, I can do 20K. I can do 50K. I can do 100K. There's just a number that's associated with it. And it's kind of this no-brainer conversation. More often than not, I do not find that to be the case. More often than not, I find people answer that with like, well, what's it going to cost? And it's sort of a dynamic conversation. And that definitely doesn't make it easy for decision making, but it is more of an elongated conversation. And so if you're a couple and that's kind of what parents and people are saying, that's not an abnormal thing. It's something that conversation does need to be ongoing, and maybe there's some research and some different things that need to happen. Another just challenge I want to address is for a lot of couples, if you are the first one in your family to get married in a long time, when parents were getting married, weddings were different back in the day, right? Everything from church receptions with punch afterwards to the wedding at the local country club. Weddings were 10,000, 20,000, 30, 40,000 was a big spend. And now it's just a different market. Weddings are bigger and they are different than they were back in the day. That is not to say that if you were a couple and you come together and you have $10,000 to spend on your big day, or $5,000, whatever the number is, if it's not a significant number sort of in the wedding world, that is not to say you cannot have an amazing celebration. There are ways to do it. There are ways you can do things DIY. There are ways you can come together and make it happen and still celebrate your wedding. Love is worth being celebrated. The budget doesn't matter. Love matters. But that all being said, sometimes there's some education, right, with parents or contributors being like, well, this is what weddings cost right now. And I'm kind of like purposely not going into actual numbers right now, because if you are listening to me here in California, or if you're listening to me in the Midwest or in New York, even, all three of those markets are very different. The numbers are different in different markets. And so kind of getting a sense from the beginning, though, of what you're able to spend, whether it's a range, whether it's a hard number, and going from there. There are three ways that people can view a budget. One is it's a fixed number. If you're like a type A budgeting family and you know that you have this amount of cash, your parents are contributing this, grandma's contributing this is what you have for your wedding, then great. You have a fixed number and you're ready to go. For others, it's more of a fluid situation, right? We're willing to spend between X and X, kind of depending on what we get, depending on what our priorities are. We will review these things and kind of decide where we're going to land. And then for others, it's like, I don't know, we just need to do research. We need to learn more, and then hopefully you're going to land on one or the other. So with the budget, the other thing I want to encourage you all in is that when people start financially contributing towards something, I believe they get a say in it. Unpopular opinion, I've seen TikToks, I've seen, whole articles written on how people's opinions shouldn't matter on your big day. I disagree. If someone is spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on something, you are opening the door for them to have an opinion on it. If I was giving my kid thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for something, I would want to make sure that, my standards were met. And I think there's a healthy relationship that can be obtained here, right? In a healthy relationship, hopefully the couple's getting to steer a lot of those decisions, and hopefully those that are contributing are finding joy in giving a gift to someone and letting them really steer it. But I'll give an example at my own wedding. We were talking about maybe not doing a seated dinner. We were talking about maybe doing more cocktail style, and my parents were contributing towards it. And I remember my dad being like, no, I'd really like for there to be a seated dinner. I would really like that to happen. And there you go. We didn't feel strongly enough about it to be like, no, this is our vision. We don't want this. And I think if we would have felt strongly that way, there would have been sort of an open and honest conversation that could have occurred. But because he was one of the people contributing towards the big day, we were like, great, we'll honor that. He didn't have a lot of other opinions, right? So that was like one that we were like, okay, we'll make that happen. We've worked with couples where the couple's like, we want to get married outside on a ranch and this and that. And they kind of have this vision. And then maybe the parents who are funding the wedding were like, you know what? We want you to get your outside view. We want these outside things. But we would actually, when we think about like our elderly guests and our handicapped guests, we would love something that's a little more handicap accessible and somewhere where it's not going to be so hot. And so we can make sure there's AC. And they had that open, honest, back and forth conversation. We're able to land on a venue that had views, but also had some indoor spaces available and other things. Again, there's a healthy way to do this, but I think the key is if you as a couple are accepting financial help for your wedding, you need to know that you're opening the door for sort of a collaborative conversation around it. It would be unhealthy for one person contributing for the wedding to be like, everything you like, she'd be like, no, I don't like that. You're doing it this way. No, I don't like that. You're doing it this way. I would say that's not great, right? You're kind of losing yourselves as a couple in that, and it's not becoming your day. It's becoming someone else's day. And that's not good. But especially if there are things you don't feel really strongly about, or there's things that someone who's contributing feels really strongly about, I think you need to have all those conversations from the beginning, because you want to all be a unified front moving forward. You're all unified investors, right, in this big event. And you can't just have, if you have your primary investor in a project, they're going to have opinions about that project. Now, there's some parents that are like, here's the budget, do whatever you want. And that's great. There's some that are like, here's the budget. I feel really strongly that we have an open bar, a band, and really beautiful flowers. You do the rest. And I have some that want to be way more involved and be at the tastings and taste the wine and read the invitations. And again, it's going to look different for every family. But the key here is if someone is contributing, if you think about it like a project, right? If someone is one of the investors, they have some sort of say. And just like in a project, you're going to have your primary investor, you're going to have secondary investors. You can think about it that way if your brain works that way, and kind of the weight that their opinion has can help be sort of determined in those ways. If you are a couple planning everything yourselves and paying for everything yourselves, then you don't have any other investors, so to speak, and technically other opinions don't matter as much, and you can decide if you want to be gracious and ask for those opinions or if you just want to do your own thing. The next piece of the budget, and I think this is really important, is just like when you go into any other big life financial commitment, right? I remember when my wife and I were going to buy our first home. We went in thinking we wanted to spend one amount. And then as we got into the process, we realized that the kind of home we wanted for our family was more expensive. And we figured out a way to make that work. And we made it happen for ourselves. And I think it's important to go into that with weddings too. You may go in, and I'm just going to use rounded numbers because they're easy, and say, we want to spend $100,000 on our wedding. And you talk with everybody and you figure it all out, and you're like, okay, this feels good. This is what we want to do. And then as you're going, you're like, you know what? What we get for $100,000 isn't what we really want. And then as a couple, you have to decide, okay, are we willing to spend more? Or is it not what our families want? Are they willing to spend a little bit more to put it at that nice hotel or at the country club or at sort of that level of service that we're really wanting? And kind of knowing that there needs to be some fluidity there. Or if your budget's not willing to go up, to be like, okay, well, let's look at what we can get in this budget range. And so knowing that there's going to be sort of, as you're deciding on the budget, also some potential fluidity there, right? Or some reality checks as you're going along, I think is really important. And one of the best way to get a strong reality check is to engage with a wedding planner nice and early. We're going to talk all about the role of a wedding planner in the next episode. But starting with a strong wedding planner from the beginning will help you navigate the budget. Now, if you have a budget and you're like, I don't know that we can afford a wedding planner, maybe do some preliminary research with the planner and see if they can help. But if you can't afford a wedding planner, another great way to sort of get that reality check on the budget is, do you have any friends that have recently gotten married in the local area? Do you have any cousins, family members, siblings, whatever it is? Ask what they spent on their weddings, not for being weird. You can say, hey, we know it's none of our business what you spent on your wedding, and we don't want to ask you an odd question, but we are trying to get a sense of what weddings cost in this area. Would you be open to sharing with me sort of the budget range that you looked at? Or if it's someone who's really private, you could be like, we're looking at spending $50,000. Is that even realistic? And again, we're not saying you should go to strangers. We're not saying, obviously talking about money is a sensitive subject, but if someone you're really close to, saying it from just like an open and honest way, being like, can you help me understand what these things even cost? That's actually the best way to ask, guys. Say, can you help me understand what weddings cost in this local area? I don't even need to know what you spent on your wedding. I'm just trying to understand like what things cost. That can be a really good way to get started. So again, if you don't have the budget for a planner, using your community, asking questions from your community can be a really great way to also get a sense of what things cost. Notice in the steps of the process, we've only talked about setting intentions and now getting unified on the finances. We haven't even gotten into like, do we want a pretty chateau or do we want a 3-course meal or a band? Because guys, all of those decisions are really fun, but all of those decisions, if you make them first, are going to create a really stressful environment. If you make a decision, for example, to get married in a giant chateau, you want to have a band, you want to have a multi-course meal, but if you only have $20,000, that's not possible. So it's important to get unified from the beginning on the intention and realistically what's financially doable for you. And then you want to engage with a planner. If you can't afford a planner, you want to start doing some more research on what things cost so you can figure out what is doable in that budget range.
Live your life within the moment, and don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away.